Hey, this is Andrew, and I wanted to record a quick video just to demonstrate how you can still use super scaffolding, even if you're generating a controller and views for a child resource that has not one, but multiple parent resources. So we would call this like a polymorphic relationship. Now, there are some caveats to how this works, and it's different than what you might think you would normally do in standard Rails domain modeling. And maybe I'll have an opportunity to explain why that is a little bit. But what I'm going to do is show you how, and I've only done this a few times myself, but I want to show you how I accomplish this using bullet train super scaffolding. So we have in the standard super scaffolding demo a site with child pages, and I want to create a image model that can be attached both to a site or to a page. So let's get started on that. So I'm going to generate a image model that references You might ask, hey, why are you specifically referencing site and page as opposed to having like an imageable relation that is marked polymorphic true? And I'll show you why, or explain in a little bit why that is. So we have site references optional, page references optional, and you would need to add a foreign key for any potential parent object that you've got. And you have to mark it optional because it's only going to have one or the other of these. And just a sneak preview or to let you know, the reason for this is the way that we enforce security concerns using can or security rules. I'll show you why that is in a second. So an image also, we'll just say name, like our standard fields, and maybe a description. I'm not actually going to do the image stuff. So we'll generate that model. And then we will migrate it to the database. Now what I'm going to do, when I use super scaffolding, bin super scaffold, I am going to create a super scaffold for image, and I'm going to create it in the context of one of those concrete relationships. So specifically, I'll start with site, and then, like I said, we have name and description. And because it's under site, it doesn't ask us for an icon. And so on site, we should, once this server restarts, we should see that under site, we now have images, and we can add a new image. Oh, please correct the errors below. You can't see the error here, but what the error is, and in fact, we could add object level errors to this form if that's what we wanted to do. Most of our errors are at the attribute level, but in this case, an error exists that isn't. So here we go. We will open the image, and the problem with it is that we need to mark this as optional true. So now it will allow us to create that image. So now the image has been created successfully, and its parent is the page, or the site. Now we also want images to appear at the pages level, and this is going to take a little bit of effort on our part, but it's pretty routine. So here's what we'll do. We'll open the images controller, and what we're going to do is say, and this is standard can, even though we're going through this super magical method that we have in bullet train, this is actually just passing through the standard syntax for defining a polymorphic relationship to can through its load and authorized resource. So we'll say you can have an image through site or page, and then we will say, no, I think that's all we have to do there. And then, oh, actually, no. And then we have to specify, and this is a bullet train thing, polymorphic, and we'll say we'll call it imageable. So instead of defining this as polymorphic at the model level, and there's a reason why we can't do that because of a limitation in can, which I'll talk about in a second. Instead, we specify that this is polymorphic at the controller level. And that's where we get the major gains of not having to have two controllers and two sets of views for this model in the different contexts that it appears. So we will start by going through, and everywhere that we reference site, we are going to replace site. In fact, actually, I'm not going to replace the sample URLs, but everywhere that we have like site, I'm going to replace this with imageable. All right, and then I'll just go through real quick and make sure. Okay, so all the other references are just in comments. So now we can also go through the views and do the same thing. And then since we're updating this translation key, we'll also go through the images YAML. Or actually, yeah. There we go. Oops. And so that matches what we're passing in. So now any references to site have been updated to be like imageable instead. So let's see where we are. If we go to routes, you can see images. And let's see if this will load or if there's something else that we forgot. All right, so we'll go to some website and it says that it can't see imageable images new. And that is because, we need to, in this case, there we go. We need to define that imageable in this context is going to be a site. So we do that in the, do that in the sites controller. And then likewise in the pages controller, in this context, we would say that imageable is a page. All right. So we have images now on the website or on the site. And when I add a new one, oh, there's no error. I was kind of expecting an error. So we'll add new image, but this is, there might still be one. No, there wasn't. That worked. And I didn't even realize that it was that easy. All right, so now let's try. If we look at, let's try adding it to the pages controller. So the way that we do that, if you look at a site show action, we have this reference to the account images index, and we're passing in as images site images. Now, Super Scaffolding has done us a favor in the site model and added the images relationship. So we want to go ahead and add that. We need to replicate these steps. Replicate that step there. And what that will allow us to do is copy this partial over to the context of a page. And let's see if that works. All right, so now Pages has this list of images, but you'll notice that there's no button for trying to add an image. Why is that? This is because all of the buttons in these partials are checking the abilities file to see whether the person can create the image or whatever before it shows a button for it. So here we go. We need to add a rule that they can also manage not just images on a site, but they can add images on a page that is on a site that belongs to the team, that is part of the user's team IDs. This is where we run into trouble. Oh, give me a second here. Oh, and now that it's trying to show the link for adding a new one, it's running into the issue because new account imageable image doesn't exist when imageable is a page. Why is that? It's because this isn't in our routes yet either. So we go here and we find where we can see how sites has images, but what we need to do is copy this for pages as well. And there are ways, that you can clean this up. Like there are route concerns and things like that you can mix in. But this is so simple, we're not going to do that. If the controller was more complicated and there were a bunch of child actions or things like that on this controller or custom actions, then what you would do is move this into a concern and then mix that concern into the different resources that have it as a child resource. But this will work for now. So we'll do that. And then you can see now it's going to allow us to add a new image. Let's see if this throws an error. It does. Why is this? Because the breadcrumbs are not, there's something wrong with the breadcrumbs. All right, so account team pages path doesn't work if, let's see here. I forget. I don't remember off the top of my head how I fixed this, but I remember that I ran into this. So let's take a look at the images controller. So it's trying to render. So it's created the image without an issue, but now it's trying to render the view. And so I think, if I remember correctly, what I need to do is branch in this controller just for the breadcrumbs. So if imageable is a page or a site, no, a page, then we have one set of breadcrumbs. And else if let's see if that works. Let's see if that works. Ah, it did. So that was the issue. And what was happening there is the variable for these breadcrumbs, you'll see now that it has images under page, under sites, under dashboard. And maybe there's some way that we can clean this up in the future, but right now we need to define that for each of the different contexts in which this controller can exist or be nested. So now we have new image details. And so I guess it hadn't created it because we hadn't even tried to create it. But now the image has been created successfully, and you can see, so we're done. Like, this thing works. Now, I just wanted to mention briefly in can, in this, I'm going to clean up my routes real quick. So we should also have, in the API context, this should also happen. I have to mention about can. In the abilities file, when you would think that you should be able to, if we had a polymorphic relationship, we should be able to do something like, and then as long as every imageable has some link back to the team, which is easy enough to do, that this would work. But this doesn't work. And the reason it doesn't work is that this mechanism in can depends on a feature in active record, which does not work for polymorphic relationships. And so that's why I'm not using, the standard Rails polymorphic relationship to represent this. It's because can doesn't support it. And maybe there's some way that we can make that work. But without digging into can and improving, and maybe it's impossible. Maybe that's the reason maybe you can't reflect on this in a way that is meaningful to generate, the database queries and stuff like that you need to do the sort of security checks that we're doing. But the point is, these are super powerful features. Can is incredible. And so in this situation, until I figure out how to make can work in this context, I am more than willing to bend a bit to define these relationships at the model level differently, because to be honest, at the model level is not where, defining this as a polymorphic relationship, that's not the big win. We can always do something in the model, we can always go into the image model and say def, imageable, and then just define this as either site or page or, whatever else. But the point is, this isn't where I save a ton of, complexity. This isn't the major value add. The major value add are these incredible CRUD controllers that reduce the amount of effort it takes to prototype our applications. And with just a little bit of extra work, still way less than it would be to try to figure all of this stuff out each time we do it and do this work manually. This is the big benefit. I really want to focus on the controller, the reduction in complexity at the controller level and repetition of effort and all of that. So because of that, I will get rid of, we don't necessarily need this, but this is, where was that controller that we were looking at? This is the big win, being able to have a single controller with a sort of abstract concept of parent, and we can load this through many different things. So that's it. If you have any questions or if I've forgotten anything and you're running into any hangups with this, don't hesitate to reach out. But I hope this helps you, implement this type of model in your bullet train app.